All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Appreciate everybody being here. Where's Pablo? Oh, you know what, bro? This is counting down from like 14 and a half minutes, and I think it's going to be a little short. Is that right?
13 hours and 14 minutes.
Oh,
there you go.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, new glasses. I'm not used to them yet. Appreciate everybody coming. This is the class on academics from a professor's perspective. Glad that you're all here. If you're looking for the other class, I think it has something to do with spiritual and mental health and overcoming discouragement. That is down the hall. We switch classrooms. So, okay, nobody got up and left, so I think we're all in a good place. Amen. My name is Brian Akins. I've been a Christian 23 and a half years. I'm in the Houston church and served in the teaching ministry in the church there. Was actually a campus minister for 7 years, once upon a time, and have led campus ministries at 3 of the 5 largest universities in Texas. Led a church planting in one of the regions in Houston. And back in 2003, our churches underwent some big shifts, and a lot of people, the contribution dropped, a lot of people were laid off, and I was one of them. So, that's my background, my story. It's okay, though. I survived. I'm still a Christian, and still very happy to be a Christian, and I'm not going anywhere. So it's awesome. So when I became a Christian in 1993, I paused because I realized that's before a lot of you were born. So it's really like, yes, I have been a Christian that long. I wasn't kidding. So when I got baptized in 1993, the semester after I got baptized, I ran into one of the sisters on campus. And she's like, oh, hey, how you doing? How's your day? And I was like, oh, it's going to be awesome. You know, I got this Bible study at like 10, and then I'm meeting these brothers to go sharing at like 12. I got another Bible study this afternoon, and then I've got this other thing this evening. And she's like, wow, it's awesome. So when do you go to class? And I was like, class? I was like, yeah, that's a good question. I honestly wasn't planning on going today. Because, you know, and then she was like, well, do you think Jesus would do that? And I was like, sister, you don't understand. I am building the kingdom of God. All right? I don't think you're looking at this spiritually. And, yeah. And then, you know, me and my 2-month-old Christianity, 3-month-old maybe at that point, she proceeded to help me understand things a little bit better through Jesus' eyes. And she pulled out her Bible and just went for it. And so, in retrospect, it was a little stronger than probably was needed, but it was good because I didn't even know what classes I had that day, to be honest with you. That's how out of touch I had gotten with my school. I was so excited to be a Christian and so focused on it, I totally blew off everything else. And, of course, Paul warns about that. He's like, you know, you guys can't quit working. You can't just give up because you think Jesus is coming back tomorrow, right? There's an expectation here. So she discipled me pretty strongly on that. She was actually on the mission team as well, the mission team to Austin. Finished my undergrad at University of Texas, the bachelor's in mathematics. Got a master's in biblical interpretation from Lubbock Christian University. After I was laid off from the ministry, got a master's in business administration from Rice University, and then went on to MIT where I got my PhD. So I have a PhD in accounting from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I'm a professor at Rice now. And I've been a professor at Rice for 5 years. So I repented. And I will add, my wife is a very, very patient woman to put up with all that. Oh, by the way, the sister that discipled me, we've now been married 19 years. So, 19 years, we have 2 teenage daughters. It's not the point of this class, but I will say very quickly in passing, a sister with conviction is worth her weight in gold. That's what you want, right? So, yeah. Do you have a question, bro?
You answered it.
I answered it. What happened to her?
I was asked, like, is she your wife?
She's my wife, man. Yep, she's teaching the class down the hall that we just switched with, actually. So, yeah. But I have a conviction about doing well in school. I've been in a lot of school. I've seen people in our church. I've seen people do really well. I've seen people struggle. I've seen people who had a lot of potential who just didn't see it fulfilled. And, you know, when we got asked to do these assignments, Marty Wilkinson, the excessively large man who closed out the service last night. Exactly. You saw him, right? The one who basically said, you don't want me finding out you did something wrong, right? And come and talk to me. Yeah. So when Marty sent out the assignments, he had like a kind of an idea for a class title and then the topic. And mine said academics from a professor's perspective. And the topic was life. And all these other topics were like outreach, dating, and I was like, life? Are you serious? You realize I have an hour, right? So I thought, okay, what I want to do is I want to start a little bit here up front with kind of a biblical charge. I appreciate all of you showing up to this class, by the way. Those of you who came of your own free will, and those of you who struggled in the class in the last year and your campus minister said you go to this class. So, I know that happens as well, right? When we were coming here, one of the region leaders in Houston was asking my wife what we were teaching, and she told her what my class was, and she was like, oh yeah, I remember you making me go to that class when I was in your campus ministry. So I understand that happens. That's okay. If you think about life, though, you think about the Bible, what book in the Bible really stands out to you when you think about good, practical living and how to navigate life on a day-to-day basis? Proverbs. Proverbs really stands out, right? That's what they're going for in Proverbs, and that's where we're going to start today. So get out your Bibles, turn over to Proverbs chapter 1. My plan is to start here a little while with the Bible, and then as we work through some things, I'm going to try to give you some practical advice as well on how to approach your classes, how to deal with your teachers, how your teachers think about students. Having gone through a PhD program and having become a professor, I realize now that my understanding of a professor's job was very much inaccurate when I was an undergrad. And I think I could have performed better as an undergrad if I had understood my professors better. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of perspective on that. Especially after I get through the biblical part here. If you have any questions about anything I'm saying, feel free to ask. Again, I'm an accounting professor, so I am used to people like raising their hands and asking questions. That's totally cool. It doesn't bother me, okay? So let's have a prayer, and we're going to start reading in Proverbs chapter 1. Father, we are grateful to be here this morning. So grateful for this conference and for everyone who put this on. It is really a blessing to become a Christian young enough to go through the campus ministry in your kingdom. I look back on my days in the campus ministry as a student and as a campus minister and think about all the people and the relationships that I was able to build. And really how studying the Bible with so many people deepened my convictions about the Bible, about your church, and about you. And I hope that everybody in this room really feels honored that you've allowed them to become a Christian at such a young point in their lives, and that they get to have their entire futures shaped by that, God. Thank you for this time to share in this class. I pray that our hearts would be soft to the Bible, that we would be receptive to the Scriptures, and that we would deepen our convictions about living spiritually and making every part of our lives subject to you. Because you deserve that. Jesus is Lord over everything that we are and do. Please speak through me this morning and help me to help people. I pray all this in the Lord's name. Amen. Amen. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. Let the discerning get guidance for understanding proverbs and parables. The sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So he starts off the book here, and he says, look, these proverbs are laid out for different types of people. First, in verse 4, he says, for those who are simple. Now, the way that simple is used in the book of Proverbs, it really just means immature. They don't know yet. And so he says, look, this is for people who don't know yet to gain direction. Which, let's be honest, is all of us in some ways. There are things that all of us don't know yet. He also says, though, in verse 5, this is for the wise. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. So the Proverbs are there to help the wise become wiser. But then in verse 7, what does he say about fools? They despise wisdom and instruction. Basically what he says is, look, somebody who's a fool is going to read this book and they're not going to get anything out of it because of their attitude. Now, and when you talk about fools and the way the word fool is used in Proverbs, this has nothing to do with how smart a person is at all. All this is talking about, has to do with someone who makes poor moral decisions. And it says this person can read this book, but they're not going to get anything out of it. And also in verse 7, he says that real wisdom starts with what? The fear of God. Real wisdom starts with the fear of God. You can't read without knowing what sound the letters make. You can't do math without understanding numbers. You can't get wise without fear of God. You can get some practical things that you can try to put into your life, but you're not going to really achieve wisdom without the fear of God. Wisdom is not mechanically applying Proverbs. Real wisdom is rooted in your relationship with God. Real wisdom is that you live this way because of who you are before God. It's spiritual. That's the real nature of wisdom. Make sense? Good. You're great students. You're so attentive and respectful. You come to school and be my students. That'd be awesome. So, now, when you read the book of Proverbs, how many of you read Proverbs before? Nice. Good. So when you read the book of Proverbs, what does Proverbs look like? What does the book look like to you? Okay, some short poetry. A manual. A compilation, right? Like there's a bunch of little pieces of things all kind of put together. Good, good. So when we think about Proverbs, we usually think about these short, pithy sayings that are a couple lines long, right? You know? That's what we usually think about. But the book starts out very differently. Have you ever noticed, like, the first 9 chapters of Proverbs looks like what? It's kind of more prose, general, normal scripture, and then starting in chapter 10, you get all these short sayings. So those first 9 chapters, it almost seems like 2 different books, right? Like the first time you read Proverbs. But really what's happening is those first 9 chapters are setting the stage through which you're supposed to read the rest of the book. They're giving you the lens to look through to interpret the rest of the book. And the first 9 chapters talk about what? They talk about wisdom. They talk about wisdom, and they talk about... What's that? Warnings, right? They talk about wisdom, and they warn you if you're going to choose to ignore wisdom, right? So, the first 9 chapters are kind of this extended discussion of wisdom. And it's mostly framed as a father's instruction to his son. You know, my son, and then he talks, right? And there's a couple of different parts of that we're going to talk about. And then chapters 10 through 30, you know, really like 31's kind of the poem on the virtuous woman. But 10 through 30 are kind of the little pithy sayings that we think about when we think about Proverbs, right? But the front part of the book really sets the stage for how we're supposed to think about the rest of it. And there's 2 major images that they use in the front part of Proverbs. This is going to make sense how this applies to academics, in case you're wondering. Some of you probably are. So, there's a couple of major analogies it uses in the front part of the book. It talks about the 2 paths. There's the path, there's the one path that is light and straight. And, you know, then there's the second path. And this is in Proverbs chapter 2. This is like verses 12 through 15. And the second path, it says, is dark, is crooked, is dangerous. And so this is one kind of dichotomy it sets up. There's these 2 paths that you can choose in life. But really, you're on one or the other. There's no in-between. You're either choosing this path of light, or you're choosing the other way. And then he talks about these 2 women. If you look over in chapter 9, it talks about 2 women, and basically the choice between these 2 women. And this is woman wisdom and woman folly. In chapter 9, the first 6 verses are about woman wisdom. The middle 6 verses kind of describe what happens, or what the wise and the foolish are like. And the last 6 verses talk about woman folly. And we're going to read the first 6 verses here. It says, wisdom has built her house. She has set up its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servants, and she calls from the highest point of the city. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of insight. So what kind of things do we see here about woman wisdom? What are some things we can pull out? What has she done, or what is she doing? Okay, she's definitely evangelizing. She's calling out, come here. She's calling that out. Great point. Yes?
I see that she's prepared. Like, she has the food ready. She's already mixed her wine. She's already set the table. It's like all prepared already in advance.
Okay, so she's definitely worked hard. And then what has she prepared? You said she's mixed the wine. She set the table. She's made a banquet.
Yeah.
This is a nice meal, right? There is meat. There is something to drink. The table is set. This is like the kind of devotional you want to get invited to as a campus student, right? This is being invited over to the elder's house for dinner. You know it's going to be real food, not pizza. You're excited about this, right? This is a nice thing. Sir?
It's also conditional. She says, leave your simple ways and you will live. Walk in the way of insight.
Okay, that's right. You got to leave the old way and come in. Great. These are great points. It also mentions that her house is built on 7 pillars. Think about something built on pillar. Like what kind of image does that give? Strength. Yeah, you can think of some of the old Greek. Yeah, but definitely strength, right? Something's built on pillars. This is strength. This is stability. This is safe. And she wants people to have these blessings. She sends messengers out to the simple, and she's calling. And really, this woman represents God's wisdom. She's calling. She's wanting us to choose. Now, if you flip down to verse 13. Or scroll, depending on what you're using. You look down to verse 13, this is woman folly. Now, as we read through this passage, think about the comparison of woman folly to woman wisdom. Folly is...
What did you say the wise woman is?
It's God's wisdom. God's wisdom, yeah. Actually, there's a passage in the New Testament where it very much parallels Jesus to this, in a way that is describing Jesus. And Jesus, you can think of being as the embodiment of God's wisdom as well. Choosing woman wisdom is really about choosing to follow Jesus and live His lifestyle. That's what that choice is. So it's a great question. So folly, verse 13. Folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, food eaten in secret is delicious. The literal Hebrew word translated food there is bread. But little do they know that the dead are there, that their guests are deep in the realm of sleep. So what comparisons can we make here? How would you describe woman folly, especially after reading woman wisdom?
I think compared to woman wisdom, she's just sitting there. Woman wisdom was hardworking, and she's preparing everything. She's just sitting waiting for people to come to her.
Excellent, right? Woman wisdom was hardworking. She's just kind of, you don't see that same preparation. There's no banquet here, right? Carl?
Yeah, but pretty much the same thing. Just completely different preparation. Like it was ready and everything. Being called out. It was just like sitting there, kind of chilling, and whoever was there.
Yeah, nice. Eric?
But there was no call to change in your life for her to welcome you.
There's no call to change. Now this is interesting, right? Because woman folly is also evangelizing. She's also calling out to people, but there's no expectation of change. There's no expectation of repentance. What about the pillars? We saw woman wisdom's house was built on pillars. Woman folly, nothing. It only looks like it's a strong house. There's no real support, right? She's offering bread and water. This is a far cry from the banquet, right? Even the pizza at a Campus Devo is better than this. The food is stolen. It's not prepared with hard work. She really represents the world's way of living. But it's not empty. The house is not empty. What's in the house? Where does this lifestyle lead? Death. That's where this lifestyle leads. It leads to death. the naive are unprepared and they don't worry about the consequences of their actions. And so the first 9 chapters of Proverbs sets up this choice. And as disciples of Jesus, we all have to make this choice. Are you going to follow woman wisdom, or are you going to follow woman folly? And then the rest of the book is really about choosing wisdom. And this is the thing I think we often miss when we study the book of Proverbs. We look at the book of Proverbs and we say, look, all these little short sayings, this is great stuff about how to live. There's some good information in here about how to manage my finances and how to spend my time. But what we don't realize is that these decisions are all spiritual decisions. They're all really about choosing God's wisdom, choosing Jesus' lifestyle. And I think that one of our temptations as disciples is to try to secularize parts of our lives. To look at parts of our lives and say, this part of my life is spiritual, but this other part, not so much. You know, I give my contribution. I worked hard to give something extra for special. I give to hope. And so what I do with the rest of my money is not a spiritual decision. No. My time. I go to Devo, I go to Bible talk, I'm in Bible studies, I'm at church. So if I want to spend 8 hours a day the rest of the time playing video games, it's not a spiritual decision. Oh, so yeah, I saw a visible reaction there. I think that may have, I'm sure it's not 8 hours a day. But I appreciate your vulnerability nonetheless. So yeah, look, every part of your life is spiritual. That's really what the front part of Proverbs is saying. All that stuff afterwards, all that good practical advice about how to live is all conditional on the front part. It's all about choosing God's wisdom. So, how you spend your free time, spiritual decision. How you spend, I know you don't have any extra money, you're in college, but you know, the extra $2 you do have, what you do with that is a spiritual decision. Think about all the Proverbs about controlling your temper. Spiritual decision. How you talk to other people. Spiritual decision. Every part of your life is spiritual. That's what it is to make Jesus Lord. There is no spiritual and secular anymore. What you post on Facebook. I know Proverbs doesn't talk about Facebook, but trust me, the idea is the same. What you post on Facebook is a spiritual decision. I think Satan wants us to secularize parts of our lives and say, you know what, I do all this stuff for God and for the kingdom, but this part over here is kind of mine. And it doesn't matter, it's not spiritual. I think if Satan can get us to do that, and then slowly start putting more and more things from the spiritual section over here into the secular, we just get more and more worldly. How you act in traffic is spiritual. Every part of your life is spiritual. You're constantly making a choice between wisdom and folly. And that choice is an allegiance to God or the world. How you approach your academics, guess what? Spiritual. It's a spiritual decision. Right? How many of you have heard lessons before preached on academics and doing well in school and Jesus did everything well? And what's the other one? Work as if working for the Lord. Those are kind of the two that end up in those lessons all the time, right? It's true. How would Jesus behave? How would Jesus treat his classes? How would Jesus treat his studies if he were you? It's a spiritual decision. It's part of just making Jesus Lord. And the Proverbs offers some really great input on doing well in school. Doesn't use the term, doesn't talk about college, but it gives great advice on doing well in school. And basically that advice is work hard. I'm sorry for those of you who came and were hoping to see a shortcut. This is biblical, so there is no shortcut. Proverbs has a lot to say about hard work. I know you know this, but I'm going to run through I'm just going to list some of the passages from Proverbs that talk about hard work. We're going to go through this. We're going to look at a couple of marks from the Proverbs on hard workers, a couple of characteristics. I'm going to talk through some practicals and open it for Q&A. Okay? Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 8, verses 9 through 11. Proverbs 10, verses 4, 5, and 26. Chapter 12, verses 11, 24, and 27. Chapter 13, verse 4. Chapter 14, verse 4 and 23. Chapter 15, verse 19. Chapter 16, verse 26. Chapter 18, verse 9. Chapter 19, verses 15 and 24. It's a lot, right? I'm not done. Chapter 20, verses 4 and 13. Chapter 21, verses 17, 25, and 26. Chapter 22, verse 29. Chapter 24, verse 27, and verses 30 through 34. Chapter 26, verse 14 and 15. Chapter 27, verses 18 and 23 through 27. And chapter 28, verse 19. Proverbs has a lot to say about working hard. And really, when you talk about doing well in school, I'm going to talk about this from a student's perspective because obviously I spent a lot of time in school. I had to go through and add it all up, but I probably spent 14 years in school post-high school. Yeah, like I said, my wife is really patient. It's a lot of degrees, right? And the PhD from MIT was not fun at all. So I've been a student a long time, and so hard work from a student's perspective is important for success, but also from a professor's perspective. And I'll talk a little bit about grading and how that influences my view on grades. I do not teach undergrads. I teach grad students. I teach master's students at Rice, and I teach PhD students. But I have taught undergrads before when I was at MIT. So, from a professor's perspective, my perception of how hard my students work actually does influence the final grades. And I'll explain that, as we go on, right? A couple of things, though. These are characteristics of a hard worker from Proverbs. First one, a hard worker does not make excuses. Proverbs 15, verse 19. The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. A sluggard uses problems as an excuse. Proverbs 22, verse 13. The sluggard says, "There's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square." Okay, the public square. What kind of settlement has a public square? A city, right? You're not finding public squares in the farms. A city. Ancient Middle East, cities had what? Around them. Walls. There's no lion in the public square, okay? There's walls around the city. It's not happening. This is an excuse. Just making up an excuse. The sluggard will make up an excuse if they don't even have one. There's no lions in the walled city. Second characteristic of a hard worker. A hard worker is not mere talk. We all know the person who tells us, next semester I'm really going to buckle down and get my grades in order, right? It's always next semester. Proverbs 14, verse 23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Proverbs 28:19. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies will have their fill of poverty. Actually putting in the work, not just talking about it, not just spinning big dreams, but put in the work. Hard worker, number 3, finishes what he or she starts. This is a funny one, actually. Proverbs 12:27. The lazy do not roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. The lazy do not roast their game. So this has the idea of like somebody going out hunting and actually catching something, bringing it back home, but they're too lazy to actually cook it. They've gone through all this work they've gone through all the trouble of getting out there and hunting. How many of y'all have ever gone hunting? Okay, so a lot of you are not from Texas. Or grew up in the cities. That's fine. So I grew up, if you're not from Texas, you have no idea who this is. But I grew up several hours east of here, very close to the border of Louisiana, in the swamps, and went hunting all the time growing up. And basically to go hunting takes forever. You go out, you set things up, and you wait. And wait, and wait, and wait. It is a massive investment. And then when you finally get something, you're super excited. You go home, you clean it, you cook it, and you have this great meal, right? Sorry if that made any of you uncomfortable. I do eat meat. But this is the idea. Look, this person started, and they really put effort into it, but they didn't see it all the way through. This is like working hard all semester, getting 2 weeks before finals and saying, man, I am so tired, I give up. No, come on, man, you're almost there. You put in the hard work. It's like, look, you got to finish what you start. Number 4, the hard worker does not love sleep. Proverbs 20, verse 13. Do not love sleep or you will grow poor. Stay awake and you will have food to spare. 26, verse 14. As a door turns on its hinges, so a sluggard turns on his bed. Look, sleep is good, but too much sleep is not. You're not going to get things done that need to be done, right? The lazy person allows something like sleep to run out of control and take over their lives. It doesn't have to be sleep. It could be watching TV, it could be video games, it could be, whatever. But the hard worker is disciplined with this, right? The last thing here, a characteristic of a hard worker, is the 5th one. A hard worker will invest. Proverbs 10, verse 4. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Proverbs 20, verse 4. Sluggards do not plow in season, so at harvest time they look but find nothing. Yeah, here's the thing with farming. I'm going to guess a lot of you didn't grow up farming because you didn't grow up hunting. There tends to be a bit of an overlap there. So, again, grew up way out in the country, so we had, I wouldn't call it a farm, but we had an excessively large garden. It is not fun. And doing that in East Texas over the summer, getting out there and weeding, right? So first you got to dig everything up, you clean up the land, you got to plant all the seed, and then you have to weed it for months in the sun, in Texas, in the summer. And it's a pain. And you have to water it. And you have all of this over this long period of time to finally get to the end and have something to eat. There's a big delay between when the work happens and when you get to see the fruits of it. That's how it works. But it says here, look, sluggards don't do that. They're not willing to put in the work and wait. Now, the Proverbs also talks a little bit about the outcomes of lifestyles of hard work versus laziness. Now, we know the Proverbs aren't promises. There are a lot of promises in the Bible. This is just kind of generally how things work out. That's what Proverbs gives us. We all know someone who's worked really hard on something and then it didn't turn out good. Right? That happens. But generally, it's the other way around. And that's what Proverbs is trying to say. So Proverbs 12, verse 24 says that those who work hard will rule, and the lazy will be slave labor. Proverbs 13 and verse 4. Those who work hard will be satisfied, and those who are lazy will be left wanting, unsatisfied. And then in Proverbs 10, verse 4, 14, verse 23, and 20, verse 13. Those who work hard will have wealth, and those who are lazy will have poverty. Like when it comes to your academics, to be successful, and not just to be successful, really, to be righteous, to be spiritual, we need to work hard. That's what it's going to take. That's what God expects of us. That's what Jesus would do if you were a student at your university. Jesus would put in the work. That's what it is to choose wisdom. Okay? I'm going to talk about some practicals now. Does anybody have any questions so far? Did I scare you? Everybody's like, oh, crud. I got to work hard. It's totally the wrong class to go to. Yeah, my apologies. Sisters can go back and listen to my wife's class. I'm sure it's much more encouraging. Challenging as well, I'm sure. Actually, I know it is. I saw the notes, so it's a good class. Okay, practicals. Time management. This is huge. This is what I would encourage you to do. Beginning of the semester, Professors are always going to pass out what? Nice! You've been in college. This is great. I love it. You need to take the syllabus. You need to identify every assignment, when it's due, and then put it in your phone. And set up a reminder so that you have enough time to get it done on time. Otherwise, you're going to show up to class on a Monday, and the professor is going to be like, yeah, that 6-page paper you have due on Wednesday? And you're going to be like, oh, yeah, totally forgot about that. I've got 2 days to write a 6-page paper. And that's probably going to impact your grade. You know what I mean? Time management. Set up reminders, get it done ahead of time. Stay on top of your work. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't fall behind in your classes. Okay? Some classes, this is more important than others. How many of you have taken a math class? A couple of you have gotten away with not taking math classes yet, or you're still writing, which is okay too. Look, the math classes, what happens? The material you're learning 2 weeks from now builds on what? What you're learning now. You get behind in a math class, you're in trouble. Right? Sometimes in like a history class or whatever, you can catch up. A math class is really tough. So you're taking a class like that, math, science, usually things that involve numbers. Although there's other stuff too, right? But certainly those classes. Usually it builds on what you've already done. Accounting, finance, same thing. Don't get behind in those classes. All right? If you start to get behind, go to office hours. Go talk to the TAs. Go ask questions, get help. Get the help you need so you don't get behind. You'll get buried at the end of the semester. The next thing besides kind of like is to prioritize your classes. Please hear me here. I'm not saying blow off classes. All right? Prioritize your classes though. Look, the classes in your major are really important. That's what you want to do with your life, right? Those need to get a priority. The classes that are really hard and are going to take extra work, they need to take priority. Don't spend all your time if you're Nico's a math major, right? So if you're a math major, see, I can relate because I was a math major too. So that's why I'm going to pick on you, right? So if you're a math major and you're taking abstract algebra or algebraic structures, which is a super hard class, graduate level class that a lot of people take as an undergrad, and you're taking sociology the same semester, don't spend all your time on a sociology class. That's not good for your career, okay? Prioritize the classes that are most important for what you're trying to accomplish. Try to do well in everything, but also be realistic. There's a brother in the Austin church, actually the team minister was telling me that he was a double E major, electrical engineering as an undergrad. And he had some class, I don't remember if it was sociology or psychology or something. And he said they had weekly quizzes, and he did all the reading. He showed up the first one, took the quiz, and got like a B. And he was kind of like, so the next week he put in way more time and just barely got an A-. And he sat back and he looked at it and he said, you know what? I got some really hard engineering classes that actually are related to what I'm going to do when I graduate. I may need to just take a B in this class so I can put my efforts into this other one, right? So again, I'm not saying blow it off. He still did the work, he still pulled a B, but he had to make some decisions about how to manage his time. But that takes thought. You have to think through things. You have to have some idea of what you're doing, right? The next thing under time management, schedule your time. This is huge. This is the only way that I was able to get through grad school, married, and 2 kids, right? You need to schedule your time, and you need to be pretty intense about it. I'm a morning person, so I try to load up my classes in the morning and be done before lunch. Then it's like, look, from 1 to 4 in the afternoon is Bible studies. And then from 5 to 10 is studying for school. Period. Now, occasionally, somebody studying the Bible would just need to study at night, right? In that case, I'd say, okay, well, I got this Bible study at night, but I'm going to take those 2 hours when I was going to study for school and shift that to the afternoon when I had time set aside for Bible studies. I'm still going to make sure I get in all my studying, right? And then some of you have work on top of that, so you need to be even more disciplined with your time. But you need to be disciplined with your time. You need to schedule it and stick to it. Shift things around if you have to. Things come up, I understand that. But realistically, it's just a lot funner to study the Bible with people than it is to study school. I mean, it just is, right? Even if you really like your major, I'd much rather go sit in a Bible study. Way cooler than studying math or accounting. Like way, right? It's not even close. But you got to be careful because you can get carried away, right? So schedule things out and stick to it. Some of you like to study for school too much. You need to schedule time for disciples and Christianity and Jesus, okay? Don't skip your quiet time because you have a math test the next day. Don't ditch church because you have finals. Don't wait till the last minute. Be disciplined, get your work done before so that you don't have to compromise your spiritual walk with God. It's not worth it. It's not the way to make it either in the long run. Learn how, this is another subpoint, learn how to study for each class. Generally, undergraduate classes, how many tests do you have? 3 to 4, right? This is different for grad school. I only give my students 2 tests, and that's pretty hard. The nice thing about having 3 to 4 tests, if you haven't had this professor before, you're not totally sure how to study for the first test. Just be honest with you, right? What you need to do, you do your best, you work really hard, you need to figure out what the professor is emphasizing in class and really work on that, right? If there's outside reading that the professor has told you to do, but he never or she never discussed it in class, figure out how it relates to what they did discuss in class. If you had some book you had to read for like a history class that never came up in the lecture, but it's super related to something that did, be aware of that when you're studying and try to pull that book in on your essays on your exam. That shows you worked hard. Professors like that. All right? Show them that you did the outside reading, right? But try to figure out, after that first test, go back and look at it. You know, what's the test look like? Was it a bunch of multiple choice? Was it all essays? Was it problems? Get an idea for how the professor writes a test. Because different professors write different tests. Then, the second test, the third test, and if there's a fourth one, should be a little bit easier because you know better how to study. Professors generally write very similar tests. They don't flip personalities in the middle of the semester. Well, some probably do, but that's a deeper issue. There's not much you can do about that, okay? Learn from the first test. Learn from the quizzes what the professor likes and how they're going to test you, all right? Open book, open note test. What do you think about open book, open note tests?
It's going to be way hard.
Excellent. You're right. It's going to be way hard. Look, open book, open note test frightened me. Always. I was like, man, crud. This is going to be the worst. So, open book, open note test, what you need to do is you need to go through your notes and make sure you have like tabs or you have some kind of index that you've written out so you can find things quickly. That's what you do with an open book, open note test. Find things quickly before the test. You can get everything on a cheat sheet if you're given a cheat sheet, yeah. Open note tests generally are harder, so try to do that, okay? Know the professor's regrade policy at the beginning of the semester. Don't show up like a week before the final and say, hey, I noticed you graded like 2 problems wrong on the first test. That was 3 months ago. The professor is not going to be pleased with that, right? I tell my students when they do that, what's my regrade policy? It's in the syllabus, and I covered it the first day of class. I'll help you. My regrade policy was you submit a written request for a regrade within 48 hours of receiving the exam back. You can't show up late, all right? Know the regrade policy. People do make mistakes in grading. If I or somebody I've got grading for me makes a mistake, I'm totally cool with changing the grade. I don't want to penalize people who don't deserve it, right? But I still need people to show up instead of like messing everything around at the end of the semester. Interacting with your professors. That's going to be the next thing. First thing was time management. Next thing is interacting with your professors. Y'all know who Aretha Franklin is? You know where I'm going with this? Respect. Respect. Treat your professors with respect. You got to be respectful of your professor's time. Let me ask you, how many of you are at university? Okay, it's most of you. Those of you who aren't, I assume, like community college, but you will be at a university some point, right? Let me ask you, what's your professor's primary job?
Research.
Yes. Your professor's primary job is to produce research. Almost all universities. There are exceptions, and the stress of that increases as the ranking of the university increases. So this is how a professor's job works, okay? I graduated from MIT. I got a job as a professor at Rice. I'm what's called untenured. which means I have what's called a tenure clock. When Rice hired me, they said, you have 6 years. At the end of 6 years, we will evaluate whether or not we give you tenure. Tenure is basically job for life. The only way to lose it is if I do something like illegal or whatever and very un-Jesus-like, right? So as long as I'm a Christian, it's not going to happen. And sometimes state schools have mandatory retirement ages too, like 65 or whatever. But it's basically you have a job for life until then. At the end of 6 years, if you don't make tenure, what happens? You're fired. Period. You're fired and you have to find another academic position. Now, in my field, do you want to guess like what percentage of professors make tenure their first job?
Not sure.
It varies across fields. Some fields are a little more gentle than others. But in everything that's economics or a subfield of economics like finance and accounting and all, it's pretty much the same. Just take a guess.
6%.
About 10. 10% make tenure their first job, which means 90% of us expect to be fired. Actually, we all expect to be fired. It's just 90% of us turn out to be right. So, and let me ask you now, last question here. What does it take to make tenure?
Quality research.
Publication of research. This is an issue too, because it's not even the quality. A lot of good quality stuff gets written and doesn't make it through the publication process because it's super competitive. So, you're a professor who's up there teaching, doesn't seem like they care very much about teaching, doesn't seem like, guess what? They may not. Because they're under a ton of stress just to try to keep their job. They're expecting to be fired. And when you get fired, what happens is you drop down a level in schools and you start over again. Right? So if you're a junior faculty, an untenured professor at MIT, you don't make tenure, you drop down to, Rice or Emory or, and then it just keeps working. That's the job. Now, guess what happens when a professor actually makes tenure? They are set for life. So, how much do they care about bad teaching ratings? It has no impact on them. So look, that's where your professors are. They're stressed or they have complete security and so they have no motivation to teach. Any professor you have that's actually putting effort into teaching, you should be really grateful for it. Because they're generally not motivated to do so. So you got to be respectful of their time, right? That's their time. You've heard before there's no such thing as a dumb question. I totally disagree. Look, you can ask me anything about the content in my class, I'm cool. I hate getting emails when somebody asks me about something that's on the first page of the syllabus. They waste my time. Don't do that. Read the syllabus. I had to write the syllabus. It takes me longer to write it than it takes you to read it, okay? Read your professor's syllabus. Don't just show up outside of office hours and say, hey, I'm Winston. I just wanted to make sure you know who I am. I'm like, dude, I was in the middle of trying to write computer code that's going to help model the statistical problem that I'm having with the simultaneity of the determination of lending corruption in developing countries and the provisioning of loan losses in the banks in those systems. All right? And I have a problem because the World Bank's data doesn't provide me a one-to-one match, and so I've got this problem where I have this imbalance between the responses and the dependent and independent variables. And I'm thinking through how to handle this, and you just showed up and said, my name's Winston. That's what office hours are for, okay? Use the office hours. Be respectful during class. Show up prepared. Do not skip class. Be ready to answer questions in class, okay? I ask my students a question, and they can't, and then it's one thing if they can't answer. That's different. I try to help talk them through it. If they haven't done the work, though, if I say, what did you get on homework problem number 3? And they haven't done the work, this is what I do. I stare at them, and I count to 10 Mississippi in my head. It's terrible. They're like not knowing what to do. I see the other students out of the corner of my glasses like, what's he doing? And I feel super awkward about it myself. It's super uncomfortable. It's really painful. But after the first 2 weeks of class, nobody does that. Everybody shows up ready. Don't be that guy. Because I can tell you, 2 years later, I remember those students. Don't be that person. Show up ready, okay? You're just wasting everybody's time. Don't check your phone in class. I catch students checking their phone in my class. You know what I do? No. I just cold call them the rest of class. You say, it's Frankie, right? Say, Frankie, why would Frankie, like the rest of the hour and a half, it's me and Frankie. That's the way it's going to go. It's me and Frankie. Guess what? Frankie didn't even bring his phone to class next week. You know, it's like, be respectful in class, right? Well, that's good. Participate in class. Show that you're thinking about it. Ask questions about the material. It shows that you're working hard. I encourage you, share with your professors. Don't expect them to be super open during the semester they have you in class, though, because it looks like a conflict of interest. Share with them the end of the semester or the next semester. And I share with a ton of my students. I had a bunch of my students who've come out to church, and never, ever have I shared with anyone during the semester I'm teaching it because it looks weird. And I can get in trouble for that. They can get in trouble if they come out to church with you the semester they have you for class. So reach out to them. Don't assume they aren't open. You know, a lot of them have been successful and gotten to the position they are because they have idolized work. You'd be shocked how many are divorced and broken and sad. Professors respect hard work. I have a participation grade in my class. And the participation grade I tell them at the beginning of the semester is completely 100% at my discretion. Which means, at the end of the semester, you know what I do? I look at my grade sheet after everything's been calculated, and I look at everyone who's borderline. And then I adjust them based on my perception of them as a student, which literally comes down to how hard I think they worked. And I'm very upfront about it in my class. There's nothing wrong with it. A lot of professors do that. There are professors who hate teaching and who resent having to deal with students, and I guarantee you they still respect it when you work hard. Show up in office hours, ask questions during class, show that you're putting the work into the class. It may affect your grade. It has affected a lot of my students' grades. The other thing it'll affect is recommendations. You know, we went to the ministry. I thought I was going to be in the ministry the rest of my life. Everything happened. We got laid off. I had to go back to my undergrad professors and ask for recommendations for grad school. And I was grateful that my standard wasn't, I just need to pass. My standard was I need to try as hard to be like Jesus as possible. So I did my best in those classes. A couple of other things you can do, just to throw out here at the end. There's a lot of schools have free tutoring services. People don't even know about that. I was an undergrad at UT, and I worked as a tutor, tutoring math, and it was free for everybody. There was one center on campus where it was totally free for everybody. There are 50,000 students at UT. I guarantee you no one knew that place was there. Maybe a few hundred people used it. Complete waste. Find out if your school has that. Use the tutoring, free tutoring or the writing labs. Another thing you can do is having study devotionals. You close to finals, study dates. That's okay. Nico, you're making an unpleasant face, man. Bro, the sisters need to study too. Trust me. You can do that once in a while. Pack a picnic. Don't do this in Texas in July. But pack a picnic. Go sit in a park somewhere. Buy a kite. Fly a kite. Have the picnic. Go to a coffee house and study for a few hours. It's a good cheap date and it'll help both of you. So in conclusion, how you approach your academics is a spiritual issue. Are you honoring Jesus with the way you approach your academics? Are you honoring God with this? Every part of your life is spiritual. And that's kind of what I want you to take out of the end of the class here. So I apologize. I think with the room shift, we ended up going a little bit longer. We don't have a lot of time for Q&A. But if you want to ask me some questions, I'll stick around. And then I'll be obviously here throughout the rest of the weekend. So thanks for coming. I hope you found this helpful. Amen.